and turn it over to Lynn for the 40th anniversary of TAR. And she's been a very important part of that. So take it away, Lynn.
Thanks, Halstead. And I really want to thank all of you who serve on the A3 board and keep the wheels turning and keep my checks from bouncing, which is always a nice thing. And with that, I'll roll into a real celebration of our 40 years. And our fabulous graphic designer, Mackenzie Long, put together this timeline for the December Avalanche Review, which if it hasn't showed up in your mailbox, it should be pretty soon. And it's color coded and it's got lots of great pictures and quotes and stuff like that. And so if you can look at it, you can see who our guests are. And since unfortunately we couldn't have Sue Ferguson with us, we have three guys to make up that deficit. We have Mark Moore, Rich Marriott, and Mr. M, Roland Emitaz. We'll start with them, and then we'll go and talk to Bruce Trimper and hear about his experience with the tar baby. And then we'll go hear some stories from Steve Conger. And then Blaze, you'll be on. And then towards the end of the hour, Emma Walker will ask me some questions and we'll look at the digital tar and we'll look at where are we going next. So how about if, Janie, you hide the timeline and let's bring Mr. M and Mark and Rich up. Oh, there you are, my friends. I wish you were here, but here, cheers to you all.
Thank you. You too.
Cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
It's only coffee.
Oh, wow. So which one of you wants to start off talking about Sue?
I think Mark should, and I think Mark should read the ode to Sue that he produced years ago. Go ahead, Mark.
Thanks. Thank you for putting me on the spot, Em. I appreciate that. And I don't have the ode to Sue right with me.
Oh.
You have it?
Yep.
Well, you'll be reading it then. Lucky you. But this is the first, oh, you can't see that. But I have volume 1, number 1 in front of me and volume 1, number 2 in front of me. And it's amazing what Sue was able to do in those early years. I mean, when we had the Squaw Valley meeting and she proposed the idea of having an association, it was met with some derision, as many of the participants there felt that an association would restrict them and would maybe have guidelines that they wouldn't be able to adhere to. But Sue, bless her heart, she was able to get beyond that. And she had a way to bring people and ideas together that few of us know how to do well. And it's amazing that the association, the talk of the association, spawned her idea of the Avalanche Review. And the Avalanche Review acted sort of as a mini ISSW. Every issue was designed to bring in the Avalanche community and bring us together. And it was interesting in the early days, the people in Northwest around Sue at her behest, we were writing a lot of the Avalanche Review. And in order to help to bridge the gap between practitioners and researchers, the idea of Snow Lips came out, and Snow Lips wrote about researchers and practitioners together to sort of bring those people together in a semi-humorous way. I mean, maybe mostly humorous, I guess.
Let's
But
hope so.
the people who were mentioned in Snow Lips, or the people, the lives and the loves of people in Snowfall, USA, probably didn't know they were going to be mentioned so prominently and derided so completely, but they were, and everybody seemed to think that this was a good way to bring in new members, new ideas, and to register the pulse of the Avalanche community. So Sue's vision was real, and she was she was very much a visionary, and we're lucky to have had her. We're lucky to have her then, even though now the Avalanche community still is very independent, very hard to change. But she was able to break through to that just because of the way that she was. So, and maybe this is an appropriate time for Em to read an ode to Sue.
Okay, this is by Mark Moore. A remarkable woman and a great friend to Sue's been a part of my life since she went to the U. Fresh out of school, her vision was grand, and she spread her good works throughout the land. Sue's courage was awesome, a smile like a sunny weather, and her laughter contagious as she brought people together. From Alaska to Utah, Japan to the Swiss, she was one of our friends that we will always miss. She was a shaker and a mover, and through wisdom she acquired, she helped us be better. She led and she inspired. While no one wants to be told what to do, it was somehow easier if the hint came from Sue. Her ability to listen was second to none, and with voice soft spoken, she got things done. In fire and in snow, she loved every day, and I think her gift to us is to live that way. Thanks, Mark and Sue.
I mean, we were really fortunate to work with Sue, have her in our midst for as long as we did. And I got to work with her in fire, and she was a force to be reckoned with in snow. And then she went to ice, and then she went to fire, and she was even more of a force over there. So I was, it was amazing. All of the not the boondoggles, all of the good work that we were able to do
Yeah.
as a part of working with Sue.
Developed Blue Sky Range, which is a smoke trajectory program. And she involved a lot of scientists, and they had seminars, and they're very boring. And she coerced me to speak at these seminars, and I'm not a scientist, but I brought in the humor, and that's what she wanted.
And to give some historical background, Sue, we started the Northwest Avalanche Center in 1975, and Sue joined us, I believe, in 1979 or 1980. I can't recall which of those, but she just got the idea of putting together and starting the Avalanche Review. And the ISSW in 1982 was after the Alpine Meadows accident, the big Alpine Meadows accident, which was the feature portion of that. And so we weren't paid that well, and nobody was paid that well. Nobody still is paid that well, for that matter. So to get over to ISSW in 1982, Ed LaChapelle coerced the university into giving us a van. And so there was a surprise that we weren't pulled over by a state patrol and never made it to ISSW, but we did. It was just as a sidelight to those who are aware, that was on that trip to Bozeman where the famous ISSW wiener was captured and at a bingo gas station in Thorpe, Washington. So but she came with the idea of putting together the Avalanche Review to try and bring people more together and be able to communicate more easily. ISSW, that was the idea behind ISSW as well. But in that van was Sue, Ed LaChapelle, Mark and I, my wife, Paul Bogger, and I forget Oh, and Pam Spears, who had just started working for us at that point. So we had a lot of time driving to and from Bozeman from Seattle, talking about the Avalanche Review. And when we got there, she distributed the first issue. I remember she put my wife on the distribution desk. And so my wife, Cindy, was haranguing people to take a copy of this and read it and subscribe to it. And so on the way back, though, Mark was talking about Snow Acres. For a lot of people who may not have seen that, it was basically a soap opera we wrote using very lightly veiled names of people who were big in the Avalanche business at that point. And we get an Alta State probably on the way back to Seattle is where the idea for Avalanche Acres came up. And I don't know if the idea, I was really clear whether or not the idea of having AAAP, as it was in the early days, preceded that or kind of grew out of that. But I just know that Sue thought it was important to bring the industry together and have an easy means of communicating. And Mark was referring to Squaw Valley in '86 when she had the big organizational meeting out in the parking lot there and was trying to harangue people. And yes, the one thing about, herding cats is difficult, and that's because cats don't want to be herded. And that's kind of like the people in the Avalanche business. They didn't want to be organized, but she was, as Mark said, she was a force of nature. She was an incredibly strong and visionary person to get this, to take a bunch of really varied people and bringing them together. And from just some of the talks we've heard tonight about A3 and NEC, I mean, it's, kind of all sprang from that original seed. So it's, I mean, I still miss Sue all the time, but, she's definitely remembered, and it's exciting. I'm really happy they're honoring the 40th anniversary of the first issue of Tar. Pretty exciting. So that's the background history we can put out in the public airwaves. If we're ever sitting around having a drink, we can get into more detail, because I don't know what the statute of limitations are on some of this stuff.
One other thing I just wanted to set the time stage, that the time that in 1982, when the first issue of the Avalanche Review came out, that was a time that Johnny Carson became host of the Tonight Show, and the musical groups Aerosmith and REM and Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers were really big back then. I know that's probably dating me a lot, but that's okay. But I just wanted to set that stage. And we were also, the Avalanche community was really trying to grapple with, we had TG snow and ET snow, so temperature gradient snow and equitemperature snow. And that's no longer really referred to now. We refer to it as facets and squares, or kinetic and equilibrium. But there was a lot of research in those early years, in the early 80s, being devoted to, well, what actually made the temperature gradient? How much of a gradient did you have to create the vapor pressure necessary to form new crystals? So this was all ongoing at the time, and it was a really good place to jump in and have a publication that talked about all the changes that were going on in the snow and avalanche community. So it was everything seemed to come together at that particular time to make it most meaningful for both researchers and practitioners. And so, Sue was able to tap into that. The Avalanche Review was able to tap into that. And I think the American Avalanche Association, AAA, was able to tap into that as well. And we're continuing to do that. And I applaud the efforts of all those who kept the idea alive. I mean, all of you should be really happy that I'm happy I'm still here, but that we're all still working in the snow and avalanche field. It's great. So congratulations to you.
Well, you guys, I wish I had known Sue better than I did. I met her at the Big Sky ISSW, and she was having audio visual issues, and she was pissed off. And I was like, I admire this woman incredibly, but I'm not getting anywhere near this tsunami because she's scary enough as it is. So
yeah, she could be intimidating if she so desired. And sometimes she wasn't aware of how strong of a personality she was. So, yeah, I agree with you. And I remember that. And I didn't want to touch it either. And that was back when we were having slides. We had to put in carousels and stuff. And if you made a mistake and you dropped, I mean, heaven forbid if you dropped your carousel and then you go, oh my God, I don't know how these went in. And then you don't know if they're upside down or maybe backwards, left to right and all that stuff. It was yeah. It's much easier now just to lose the whole damn presentation
That's right.
in the digital
Hey,
world.
and Lynn, I want to just, as kind of a final thing about the history, as I want to thank you and congratulate you on the way you've carried the heritage on over all these years. You carry a lot of passion and commitment to it, which amazes me how much energy you bring to the Avalanche Review, and which de facto means you're also bringing to the being able to give this field a chance to communicate easily. But you've done an amazing job, and I think that Sue, wherever she is right now, is really happy with the work that you've done.
Wow.
I agree.
Well, thanks, Rich. And part of my reward is getting to spend time with people like you guys. And I think we'll let the curtain drop on that one evening where I was supposedly working on the Avalanche history book, me and Scotty Savage, and at your house, Rich. And we started drinking too much and then drank too much wine. And I remember some stories from Mr. M. And I think we'll just let the curtain drop. I don't know about the statute of limitations, but you guys are still most entertaining. So thank you for your energy.
Best to be careful in the digital age. That's all I can say.
This is all being recorded, right?
Uh-oh.
None of that goes away. Let's transition. I see Bruce Trimper. Hi, Bruce. And and I'd like to introduce Bruce as he who got his arm twisted by Sue to become the next TAR editor. So tell us some stories of how that happened and how the TAR baby worked for you, Bruce.
Okay, can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Turn your volume up. Can you turn your volume up a scooch?
I don't know. Maybe I can. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay. So can you hear me better now?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Too much?
No, you're good. Just go ahead.
Okay, sorry. It's always good to test the AV and make sure you're working before you start talking. So yeah, it was very, very intimidating, as you can imagine. You know, someone like Sue Ferguson is somebody I really admired, and she's just so darn talented at everything that she's ever done, as far as I know. And then, you know, I was hired as the director of the Utah Avalanche Center in the fall of 1986, and Sue was leaving at the time. And so a lot of people assume that Sue and I knew each other really well, but actually we didn't ever get to work together very much. So we knew each other mostly just professionally. So I really wish I could have worked with Sue more and spent more time with her and learned from her. And, you know, that's one of the great disappointments of my life. We did get to ski together for a day because I used to go to Bozeman and visit the Utah Avalanche Center with my mentor, Dwayne Bowles, you know, started the Avalanche Center. So I'd go down there, and so we spent a day skiing up at Sundance with the gang. And Sue and I are both ex-ski racers. So we had a great time together, just tearing up the mountain, and kind of left everybody else behind, I think. But we had a fabulous time. We kind of bonded then, and I wish we could have kept up, you know, that kind of relationship, or at least that if I could have worked together for a while with her and learned, because I didn't know anything about publishing. And I was, and I think it's fair to say that when she turned it over to me, we went from probably the best editor that the TAR ever had, with the exception of Lynn, of course, you know, and we went straight to the worst editor that Tar ever had. Because as I look through some of these volumes now, and I don't have all the back issues, but just looking through, especially some of the early ones, they're horrible, absolutely horrible. So now the first year I was at Utah, she just wanted to turn everything over to me because everything was already in Utah, the printers, the graphic artists, and everybody like that. But I said, no way, I'm just fresh in town. I need to learn a whole new cast of characters. Got a huge job just to get my feet on the ground. So she published it for another year. And then the next year, she finally twisted my arm and got me to take it over. She says, oh, it's so easy now because we've converted everything to PageMaker. You just do everything on the computer. And I go, okay, well, I can handle that, because she had bought this, first generation IBM personal computer before she left, and I inherited that and had to learn how to run the darn thing. And so I thought, oh, cool, I'll just do everything on the computer. And that software was so kludgy and so buggy, and you just had to wrestle it to the ground every time. And it was just horrible. It's made for Windows, but there was no such thing as Windows in those days. It's graphic, and there was no graphics in those days. So anyway, those first few issues were just a disaster, and they looked terrible. You'd scan an image and it would just, you could hardly even see somebody's face. Anyway.
Bruce,
Yeah,
how did you get articles? Were you as good at arm twisting as she was?
No, I didn't know the cast of characters nearly as well as she did. So I just started writing most of them myself. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? And what was cool is Sue talked me into, she had went to the Swiss Institute, in Davos, and spent a month there, I think, doing an internship when she was younger. And she talked me into going there, that summer. And I did. So I went, spent a month there, and I could spend a day with each Avalanche scientist there, and, taking notes and getting all their information from all the scientists I could, especially Hans Gubler and people like that, and brought it back. And so then when I took over the Avalanche Review, that's one of the first things I did, is just start to write about how they did everything in Europe, how they did the avalanche forecasting, and what Hans Gubler was doing, and what all the different scientists there were doing, which was pretty fun. And so that's when I was first, I had an article, what did I call it? The Battle of the Avalanche Dragons, where I talked about air blasts and, all the mechanics of how slabs failed and things like that, the latest thinking from Europe. So it's fun writing about that stuff and using a lot of those graphics. So I kind of dipped into that chest and did the best I could. But still the quality was pretty poor. Anyway, as I looked through these things, they got better. And actually, I think towards the end, I think maybe I wasn't doing such a bad job, but I had so much to learn. I'm a bit dyslexic to begin with. I had some learning disabilities, I think, and so, I was a horrible speller, and I still am. So I'm lost without a computer spell checker, and taken over from somebody like Sue Ferguson, who's probably never misspelled anything in her life and never encountered a word she didn't know in her life. So it was a hard transition, but anyway, it was like having two full-time jobs. I was routinely putting in 16 hours a day, on my job, and then the Avalanche Review, and then trying to talk people into articles. And it is a typical way it went back in those days. So for instance, the Avalanche History of Alta, I think, was one of the best articles that was published when I was there. That was written by Mark Kalatowski, who was my ski racing buddy from Montana. And he was a patroller at Alta, and he put a lot of time into doing all this research. And he wrote this huge article about the complete history. And I was pestering him for it. Yeah, I want to put it in the Avalanche Review. And he finally delivered it to me, and it was all written on yellow legal pad, handwritten. And a stack of, photographs. He was a good photographer, so he did all the all the darkroom work, taking the old photos and making prints out of them. So at least we had those. So I had to retype all of his notes, but he was a horrible writer. Sorry, Mark, if you're listening, and so I had to pretty much rewrite almost every sentence in every paragraph. I should have put myself in as a co-author, but it really came from him. It was a lot of work, but we got it in there. But a lot of things that were turned in those days were handwritten, scraps of paper that would come from all over Europe. And I was so darn busy, just trying to keep up. And I would take off in the summer and kind of go do my expeditions and so on. And I'd come back and the mailbox would be so full, it would just be a post office box that was overflowing, and they would quit delivering things there, and they were sending things back to the people who send them. So it was just a mess. We really needed a secretary, but I was the only person. Anyway, I wrestled with it for, what did you say, 6 years, I think it was. And
Hang on. Hey, Janie, can you throw back up the timeline for Bruce, please?
I think it was 6 years, as I recall. And I was living in the Alta upper guard station most of that time, the same place that Ed LaChapelle lived. So it was a pretty great way to live. But I was being kicked out of there about that time because the Forest Service was selling it to Alta, and I was going through so many different changes. It was a real watershed time of my life, and I realized that I just spent so much time working on the Avalanche Review and Avalanche forecasting. Silly me, I looked at my job description and it talked about all these things I'm supposed to do avalanche forecasting, and never said anything that I was supposed to keep schmoozing the Forest Service and balancing the budget and everything like that. So I kind of neglected a lot of that stuff, and I was on the verge of being fired. And so I just had to give it up and was begging people to take it over. And then Steve Conger, who lived just down the hill, 100 yards or less than 100 yards, 50 yards from where I lived in the lower guard station, he said he wanted it. And, I just had to, fight to keep the smile off my face. And thinking, yippee, I finally got rid of this albatross. And I said, oh yeah, you're going to do a great job on this, and you're going to really like this. And, and I just quickly grabbed all my shelves and file cabinets and everything and hand carried them down through the snow, down to his house, and kind of just dumped it all on him. Sorry, Steve. So maybe we should turn this over to you, Steve.
Well, thanks so much, Bruce. And I think the whole Avalanche world appreciates your 6 years and then your many years on top of that with your books and your work at the Utah Avalanche Center. And if you guys don't know, my friends, that Bruce just got inducted in the Utah Ski Hall of Fame, you'll see a little thingy about it in the Avalanche Review that should be arriving in your boxes pretty much any day now. So anyway, glad to see you get some recognition, Bruce, and happy retirement, buddy.
Thanks for putting that in there. I was surprised to see it when I opened up the Avalanche Review today. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Bruce. Hi, gang. Hi, Lynn. Now I see Blaze is out there and lots of really memorable names in the crew. I remember it a little bit differently, Bruce. I remember the day you came down to visit Dwayne, because from MSU, you were on a road trip with with your girlfriend at the time to visit Dwayne, and I was just a young buck patroller over in Park City, and we skied together.
Actually, my girlfriend at the time was Dwayne's daughter, Cindy.
And
Dwayne could have been my father-in-law.
Yeah. And Dwayne was one of my mentors, teaching me how to set up a weather station, etc. But fast forward to I took a little hiatus and went to work for a small outdoor company named Patagonia, and then came back to the Avalanche world in the early at a point, and I ran into Bruce in the washroom at the Breckenridge ISSW, and And I said, "Hey, Bruce, what's happening?" He goes, "Well, he caught me up in about 3 or 4 sentences." And I think the Avalanche Review that was handed out that at the Breckenridge ISSW had an advertisement for editor, and it was I was ready to make my do what I could to contribute. So I said, "Hey, Bruce, I'd be a co-editor," and I never saw I never saw that look on. He did a really good job of don't play poker with Bruce, because he hook, line, and sinker. I was in. And it followed up with approval at the AAAP board meeting, where I was approved, because at that time the editor was also the publications chair, who was automatically a member of the board because of the roots of the Avalanche Review as part of the association. And after I was approved as the new co-editor, we're walking out the hall, and I know Bruce at the Utah saw, he talked about how John Montaigne never had a bad word to say about anybody. Well, at that time, John Montaigne pulled me aside, who was the president of A3, and he said, "Steve, I just hope that you don't include the kind of humor that Sue did." And so that was my advice from Dr. Montaigne.
And did you? And did you?
I did my best to, but that relied on other people to contribute, to essentially taking and hand transcribing snow lips into electronic form. And one of the great things that as I inherited it from Bruce, I inherited our first real graphic designer, Susie, who was the power behind what the Avalanche Review looked like. It was in the days of those blue line paste up boards, and I would have to take all of the slides that Halstead would send me, or any of the other photographers, down to the local reproductions and have them converted to some digital format that I could send to Susie, and deadlines were much different than today, because there was always a lot of things that got in the way of getting things out. We also, like avalanche cycles and late contributors. We also were trying to put out, I think, what was it, six issues a season, and trying to stay on a schedule like that, to where it was, again, beating the brush for contributors, to getting a great article from the boys up on Stevens Pass about how they used Reco to find the guardrails in the spring, but I had no photos. So I went out in the parking lot with my camera, and I took a picture of a little Matchbox truck with a Reco chip on the back of it, saying that the front page picture was Reco on the highway. That was my attempt at humor, and it was pretty bad. I don't think anybody ever got it. And I don't think I ever had a front page as good as Bruce did. I think the Avalanche History of Alta by Kalatowski, and Brad, how does this, it doesn't work with my background.
Do it right up against your, rotate your screen down a little bit and put it right up against your body. Forget about it.
Okay.
Don't bother.
Don't bother.
No, you got it. You got it, Steve.
Brad Micklejohn's Safe Skiing, backcountry skiing and avalanche terrain. I mean, I think that's one of the seminal front pages for the Avalanche Review. And Bruce was he had a lot of great great articles. And during my tenure, there were sometimes we had 4 pages, maybe 8. Struggled for content just because we were trying to generate so many issues. I think one of the biggest things about and the best things about the Avalanche Review is how Lynn has made this printed document relevant in our current day. When I was editor, it was our subscribership, our membership was low because the hard copy essentially made its way around numerous the patrol shacks. There was one memorable time when the University of Colorado State University contacted us because they needed a back set of copies for their library because they had lost all their original Avalanche Review copies during the flood. And then along the way, during that time, I was Blaze Reardon was a housemate. I was actually his housemate. He was the one, and I was fresh back to Utah and wound up living with him. And then after 10 years of being the editor, he actually had a formal background in English, and I was able to pass it off to Blaze.
Well, Steve, wasn't there a short tenure in there where Farthen Felix? Did you hand it to Farthen, or where was he in this?
Yeah, Farthen. I handed it to Farthen for 1 season, and I was still publications chair, and then it went from Farthen to Blaze.
Any last words there, Steve? I know you like last words.
I have no last words today.
Well, I appreciate you continuing to contribute and continuing to, at the risk of using this word a lot, and continuing to stay relevant. So appreciate that a lot. And so Blaze, we're gonna pull you into this conversation, buddy. So you ended up with the bag, didn't you, after Jeff and Farthen went elsewhere, right?
Well, I was originally asked to be, I think Carl Berkland actually called me. I was a first or second year forecaster and asked if I'd be willing to help Farthen as assistant editor. And since it didn't seem like that much work, and I didn't really think I knew that much about it, I said yes. And I think it was less than a season before I wound up with the whole thing in my hands. And so, yeah, that's kind of how that happened. I do remember, yeah, it was pretty much of a surprise. I didn't really expect it to happen. And suddenly I had this whole thing. And I think Steve talked about this a bit. There were 6 issues at that time. They came out during once a month during the 6 winter months of the year, which meant that the production schedule was super tight. And so everything, and as Bruce and Steve have talked about, it was a non-digital or barely digital production. And so everything had to happen really quickly. And I found it really hard to make that happen. And so the other thing, so it was often, I think my first year I didn't have much help, it was hard to make it happen on time. And then the other thing was, I felt like I got a lot of articles, but you kind of had to know who was who to understand the article or what they were doing. And I felt like the magazine would be more useful if it had articles that any practitioner could read and understand. Any patrol shack, you didn't have to know who was who. And so I started, and then of course, I started trying to get more articles. And then of course, the writing, coming from an actual English and editing background, I just couldn't print things that were really poorly written. And so I started sending things back to people, including the president of the A3 at the time, who didn't really like that very much. And so then on top of everything, the tight production schedule, I had to fight with him to actually get the edits done. And I reached a point where I was pretty quickly ready to quit. Yep. So.
And tell the audience, Blaze, about, about our, oh, this is a good prompt, because Mackenzie just logged on. So, hi, Mackenzie. Blaze is about to tell the crowd about our first graphic designer out, well, no, our second one after Susie. So,
the graphic designer that Farthen had was from Moab, and he wasn't a snow professional in any way, and he had a real penchant for raves, desert raves. And so he would often disappear for long periods of time and then take a while to get back up to speed. So that added to the production difficulties. Yeah. So eventually Russ Johnson was the president of the A3, and he had a conversation with me over the phone, and I didn't realize quite how I was being salesman. But he asked me what it would take to keep me on as editor. And I said 4 issues a year instead of 6, more pages in each issue. And the understanding that I was going to edit everybody's articles, and that the former president of the A3 kept his comments out of my editing. And next thing I know, Russ delivered on all 3 of those, and I was stuck with Tar.
yeah, you were stuck with it, but you're a really good editor. If you guys don't know this out there in Zoomland, yeah, Blaze's English degree has rubbed off on a lot of us. And yeah, I appreciated that. So, so there was Blaze at ISSW. What was that? It was, I think, 2002 in Penticton.
It was the one in Penticton. I think that was 2002. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that was 2002. And we had both gone to one of the, I think we were still the AAAP, one of the membership meetings one evening. And, you know, I'd had a couple of beers, as I am wont to do. And that doesn't make me any more quiet, shall we say. And so I'm sitting next to Blaze, and somebody up there, it might have been your dad, Janie, is talking and talking. And I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings, Stuart, and I get my elbow into Blaze. I'm like, wow, they need to be edited. And Blaze might have had a beer or two, and he says to me, what do you know about editing? And I'm like, I know a lot about editing. You just try me. And he makes that little noise, you know, kind of like, And then he does try me out. And so I shortly become the assistant editor, and Blaze shunts off to me the things he doesn't really want to deal with, like all the little what's new bits, and then a couple of specific authors that maybe the statute of limitations hasn't expired on that one, that I took over. And suddenly there were 2 of us working on this thing, and we had a really good time with it. At least I did. I don't know. What do you think, Blaze?
Almost definitely. It was a lot more creative, and there was a lot more energy, and it was a lot less of a chore. It was a lot easier to kind of think about what should be in there and get more people to write and contribute. It really helped change it from being the big workload that Bruce and Steve and I have described at times.
Well, and in the interim, there had risen up this thing called the internet. And so we were able to get submissions, not just written on yellow legal pad, but, you know, as Word documents, and then reasonably scanned or electronic forms of photos. And one of the first things I convinced Blaze to do at the time was to shift from this guy who liked to do raves, go off into the desert and didn't like feedback, to this local gal, Karen Russell of Fall Line Design. And her motto was never miss a powder day. And she was perfect for us. And she loved feedback, and she loved us, and she loved the project. And she was with us for 10 years.
Yeah.
Um,
It was also the first of my attempts, the subtle way I was moving it into your lap by having the designer down the street from you.
Well, it worked pretty well, and then you and I became co-editors, and we talk a little bit about in this article in the New Tar about that high point in our careers when we got that ascending spiral essay from Ed LaChapelle, and it
Yeah.
really felt like we were engaging the people whom we wanted to hear from when we heard from Ed.
Yeah, that was definitely a highlight. We did the theme issue. You and I started talking about doing theme issues, and we scoured ISSW for possible articles and got people to contribute. And then Ed read them somewhere up in McCarthy, and as he put it, wrestled with his word processor for a while, and eventually spit out the ascending spiral to us. And I think it was really about 6 months before he passed that we published that. So it was definitely a thrill for me.
Well, and then you went to grad school and you asked me if I wanted the Tar Baby, and I said absolutely. And right after you left, we had our first issue with color in it.
Yeah, you and I had worked on that for a while with the board. First, I think we had color cover and back, because we sold the board on the idea that they could get more money for advertising if the back was in color. And then eventually we got it 20 or 24 pages in full color.
Yeah.
Somehow when I was publications chair or something, forget exactly how.
Yeah. And then, what was that? When did you go to grad school? 05?
07.
07. Okay. So basically I've been driving
passed
this
it.
bus since then.
If not a little longer.
Yeah. Let's see, a couple of more people that I'd like to introduce. Blaze, I really appreciate your mentorship. You guys, if you all don't know, Blaze still edits and reviews my editorials from time to time when he's not in an Avalanche cycle. And it's really one of my closest friends and greatest mentors. So yeah, thanks for that, buddy.
Thanks for taking it over.
Tom Sawyer. A couple more people I want to bring in. I want to bring in Emma Walker, who was our A3 admin assistant and who helped with the digital tar. And then I want to bring in Mackenzie Long, who's our current graphic designer. And she's like pulled off on the side of the road somewhere between Canmore and her home in Eastern California. And she really wanted to zoom in and be part of this. And I don't know what else to say about Mackenzie, but she's amazing. Mackenzie, there you are. Can you say a couple words?
Hi, everyone. I'm just really excited to be part of the A3 team and work on TAR. It's definitely one of my very favorite projects that I work on. And I really appreciate all of you. And even if I haven't met many of you, I read a lot of your articles on a regular basis. So I feel like I know you. Yeah, I just wanted to say hello and thank you.
So keep smiling, girl, and thanks for your energy. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for all your energy. You do such a fabulous job.
Wow. I'm going to hand it over to Emma for a little bit because I am somewhat awkward talking about myself. And so Emma did a hilarious profile of me for this December tar, and Emma's going to also take us through the digital tar. So hi, Emma, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Lynn. I am not shy about talking about you, so thank you for giving me the chance. I'm a huge Lynn fangirl. Who among us isn't? So I'm happy to talk about you a little bit about the digital tar before I jump into a tour. It's always really funny to me to hear about Blaze, for example, getting Tom Sawyered into doing something, because Blaze has become a master of the Tom Sawyering, and that is how I keep ending up with more to do around here. It's how I became the editor of the Snowy Torrents, and so Blaze has learned, it sounds like, from some of the masters, and has really continued that long and storied tradition here at A3. So thank you, mostly Blaze. So yeah, really fortunate to have Blaze and Lynn as some of my own mentors, which was why I was so thrilled when Lynn and Dan Caveney asked me to help get involved with the digital tar as they were kicking that off last fall, right around this time. So the digital tar, I'm gonna ask Lynn a few questions, even though I kind of know the answers to them, because she's gonna say the answers much better than I ever could. But this really was originally the concept behind the digital tar was sort of I think, Lynn, you and Dan have described it to me often as like the print tar, but not quite. So there's some of the same content that you'll see in the print tar, but also some rich media and some other things that obviously don't translate well to print. So there's a few special things in each that you can only get in that place, which I think is kind of a cool thing about the whole Avalanche world. A lot of us know these sort of secret special places. And so it's kind of cool that you have to know where to look to get the right information. And so that's something that we've continued with the digital tar. So if it's all right, Lynn, I'll ask you a couple of questions, and then maybe we could have Dan join us for part of that, since really the idea for this also came from Dan. So ask you guys a few questions, and then we could maybe just do a quick tour so we can get people excited, since we're going to start having more content again on the digital tar now that the season is in full swing. And I know Jen Reddy is going to be doing a lot of that. So I'm not sure if Jen's on. It doesn't sound like Jen's on tonight, but maybe folks can, at the end, we'll make sure Jen's email address is in there so people know that if they have ideas, that's who they should send them to. So let me pull up my questions for you guys first. I think the first thing, and Dan, maybe this is a question for you, because I think that this is something that you really, Lynn always tells me that she was a little skeptical of it at first. So I'll let you tell us why you thought this was a good idea. What can we give our readers with a digital tar that a traditional print publication really can't? And why are those things important for our audience?
Well, the sort of the genesis of the idea was, we wanted a venue where we could get some stuff out, and my organizing construct is timely, timeless, and with rich media in it. So, the timely stuff is, there is a publication cycle, 4 issues per season. And we thought it'd be useful to be able to get stuff out more quickly than that without sending email to everybody. So that was one of the things we wanted to do. Other articles we think people are going to want to reread and reference, and it's just easier to do that on the internet than it is, in print, because you don't have to go digging around for your back issues. And then I think maybe most importantly, Lynn and I would talk about, there's certain things like, our seminar series and podcasts that people are doing, and you just can't, in, some video contests that we've run, and, you just can't get that sort of stuff in print at all. And so we just thought that there was a real opportunity to accomplish those 3 things in a digital environment that we couldn't do in print. And at the same time, everybody thought it was very important to continue with the printed tar, because the members really love that, and so do we, and or so do I. And so this seemed like a good way to expand upon the possibilities of tar, while at the same time preserving and really enhancing, I think, the printed one. So that's what we were hoping to achieve with this.
I will say that I was really adamant that we not put the entire printed tar on the internet. This is part of why I really believe in having something you can hold in your hand. I wanted to see, in my mind, I can see ski patrollers up in the top shack. Oh, is that the new tar? And you guys might not know this, but it's sized to fit on the back of the toilet. So, I want it to be in your hand and to be passed around that way. Sort of like the skier's journal or the surfer's journal is really what we were, when we went to this big format, what we were thinking about.
So speaking of that content that you want people to be reading that's accessible to people, so when Dan had me take over starting to post on Digital Tar, one of my assignments, like the sort of like direction I was given was like, here are some articles that Lynn has picked out from past issues of Tar. So let's pull these out of the archives and put them on Digital Tar. And it's like this spreadsheet that is clearly just like if Lynn's brain was put into spreadsheet format. And she has this, it'll be like Huckham, Conger, 38.2. And it's I'm like, how are you remembering all of this? It's all just like you've pulled, you've like gone through the archives in your brain, and somehow I think there were maybe 2 or 3 errors out of like 60 stories. And other than that, Lynn has just like where it was like in the wrong issue and it was off by 1 issue, but in the same volume. I'm like, well, if I ever need to like drop a bunch of toothpicks and ask someone to count them, Lynn is who I'm coming to first, because she's going to be able to remember how many there are exactly. So Lynn gives me this huge spreadsheet, and it's like all of these incredible stories from Tar over the years. And it's like categorized in these really specific, she has these like really specific categories that she wants things posted in. And obviously every article is like provides great value to our community. And of all the articles that you've edited over your 18 years, Lynn, I'm curious, like, what made some of those articles stand out that you pulled out of your brain and dropped into a spreadsheet?
I like a wide variety, but I like authenticity. There we were. There was the debris hitting the road, and then we did this. I want, I really embrace Montaigne's ISSW theme of from theory to practice, and that's really become my theme for the Avalanche Review. I like having research and science, certainly, but it needs to be something that then we can adapt into our practice. A way we can think differently, a tool we can incorporate. And so that's really my touchstone for whatever that I want in TAR, is how does this affect decisions that we make in the field? So.
Well, and I'd like to add to Emma's comment. The reason it's remarkable how you can hold all those articles. Frankly, it's a little weird, and in a good way. And I think that you can sift through that because you can remember those, and that's just like calling you on the phone. It's like, hey, somebody was asking me about this article, and you'll know, and it's really quite something. It's very impressive and cool.
Well, I think I see myself as, and I know a lot of people think of me this way, is that I'm the librarian of the Avalanche world. And I certainly don't mind that. And I've been able to leverage that into, oh, okay, Dan, you're working on this and thinking about this, and Emma's working on that, another aspect of it. Let's get both of your perspectives, or why don't you work together? And so that's why I'm really effective, is that I ask people to write about what they know the most about, And so I remember these things because I pour a lot of myself into them, and because for 99% of my authors, I know you. I see you guys all out there. You know, I know you're my friends, and I'm fascinated by what you're doing. And if you guys read my editorial in this December TAR, you'll see that I finally figured it out, that you're my people and this is my mission. So I'm incredibly fortunate to have found where I ought to be. So, yeah, next steps, I don't know. I'm not tired of it yet. I've got my eye out for a replacement at some point, but they have to show me that they're worthy. You guys remember, what was that? Monty Python. Anyway, we're kind of running out of time. Emma was going to take us through the digital TAR, but Emma, I don't think we have time. I'll
That's
encourage.
okay. I'm going to drop a link in the chat and you all can take yourselves on a tour.
Yeah, do that. And I will say to all of you out there, if you've been thinking about writing something for me or for the community, stop thinking about it and do it, please. Okay? Yeah. I don't know what else to tell you all. I think I'm really trying to carry through on Sue's legacy. The internet is awfully helpful. The A3 board is really helpful. Having Mackenzie's enormous talent is hugely helpful. And yeah, I thank you all for continuing to pay your dues and so my checks don't bounce. So yeah, I'm proud to be in this hot seat. So thanks, team. Halstead?
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you very much. It's like we can't operate without you, so I appreciate you every day.
If there's anyone who has, I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions. If anyone has a question that's burning that they'd like to ask Lynn. If not, we can just celebrate what a cool part of A3 TAR is. It's really the backbone, and this has been so wonderful. I wish we were all in person and could celebrate together after this. But thank you, Lynn, and thank you to all the panelists for taking some time out of your evenings to make this happen. This was so special, and just thank you from the bottom of our hearts and on behalf of the whole A3 team.
Yeah, thank you for being here tonight.
Let's see, we don't have any questions yet. Scott Savage, are you still on? It looked like you had your hand raised earlier. Not to put you on the spot. Okay, well, if anyone has any questions that come up after you take time to kind of settle in this evening, feel free to email Lynn or myself, and we can pass them off to any of the panelists. And again, if you have questions related to A3's work ever, I will also put my email in the chat, and please feel free to reach out to myself at any point. And Halstead, with that, I'll let you wrap it up and bring us home.
Well, it's great to have another general membership meeting, and it's also fabulous to get to celebrate the 40th year of the Avalanche Review. It's definitely, I can't even think, I mean, the first time I picked up a copy of it was issue 1 in REI, and I was like, what's this little funny newspaper? And I kind of liked it, and so I bought it, and I have a complete set. I can't believe I do. So that's, I mean, it takes up a lot of room in the house, and Barb wants me to get, pass it off on somebody. So, but we really want to celebrate A3, and we appreciate all the members attending, and be safe out there this winter. Okay. We need you to be here. So that's enough from me.
Hey, can I throw one more thing in? I know you were trying to send us all home, but we're working with Montana State to
Oh, yeah.
get the TAR archives up on their servers in a format very similar to ISSW proceedings. And so we hope to have that done by spring. There's been some weird little hiccups where they have to be able to be read aloud to someone, but we're working on it. So pretty soon
Right.
you'll be able to search the TAR archives. And Jen Reddy just put the PDFs that we have up on, there's a tab on the digital TAR as well.
Okay. Yeah, we should be, we're trying to get an intern for this year, and it should work out for getting MSU, getting all that stuff figured out for, it's really amazing what they have to do. So I know it's great. Thank you. Appreciate it, Lynn.
All right, cheers, team.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
for
everyone.
for not turning your flying monkeys loose on us all.
Have a good night.
Take care. Thank you, everyone.